Lesson 6, the distributive property. In this lesson, we're going to talk about order of operations to evaluate an expression, and we're going to use the distributive property and the Botts method to multiply polynomials. Let's start by writing down the order of operations. Most of you probably have heard the expression PEMDAS, or maybe please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And that's a way of helping you to remember the order of operations. P stands for parentheses, which says do whatever's in the parentheses first. The E stands for exponents, like the 2, and that says do exponents second. The M and the D stand for multiplication and division. And those two, you can actually switch the order around, because those two, you do them in the order of left to right, whatever one comes first in the problem. And then the A and the S stand for adding and subtraction, and you can actually switch the order of those two around, because again, you do them in order from left to right. So if subtraction happens to come before adding, then you would do that first, just because it came first in the problem. Okay, this first problem that we're going to do is going to kind of play with some numbers. We're given the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we can only use them one time, as well as the operations adding and multiplying. And we can use those as many times as we want, and we can use parentheses. And we're going to try to write a problem that the answer, that's what the word evaluate means, the answer comes out to 16. Okay, so for example, we're basically going to do guess and check. Okay, so for example, I might just try playing with the numbers and saying 1 plus 2 plus 3 times 4. And see what that comes out to, and then I check it and see if it happens to make 16. And you can just use your calculator and see what you get. So in this case, 1 plus 2 plus 3 times 4, that comes out 15. So I was close, but not quite right. Okay, so that's not right. So this is my check. Okay, so that's the checking it out. It came out to 15. That's not right, so I try again. Now, they also said we could use parentheses. So, let's see. Maybe I don't want to use them in order. Maybe I'll do 1 plus 3 plus 4. And I'll put those in parentheses. And then say times 2. Okay, so parentheses 1 plus 3 plus 4, and then times by 2. And I got it. Okay, now I have to be honest, I had already figured it out, and I knew that that was the right way to do it because I already sat and played around with it. Sometimes it's going to take a little while, a little bit of playing around, but that's what you want to do, is sit there, kind of play around with the numbers. You guess it, you check it using your calculator to see what it comes out to until you finally get the numbers in the right order. But the whole point is they said we can only use these numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we can only use the operations adding and multiplying. And we can use those as many times as we like, so I used adding 3 times, multiplying once. And they said we could also use some parentheses. Remember, with parentheses, that means that the calculator is going to do that part first. So it added 1 plus 3 plus 4, and that's 7, or that's 8, I'm sorry. And then multiplying by 2, 8 times 2 is 16, which I did, when I was doing this myself, I kind of thought about that. Well, is there a way to make 8 times 2? And that's how I actually was able to come up with the answer. I thought about also, like, is there a way to make 4 times 4, but I wasn't able to come up with that, so that's why I went to 8 times 8. Or a times 2, excuse me. Okay, so this next problem, this is another one. It says insert parentheses to make the following statement true. So the way that the problem is, normally, let's see what it comes out to the way that it is. The way that it is, you would do exponents first, which would be this part of it, and that would be 16. And then you would do the multiplying, which 3 times 16, I believe, is 48. Okay, so that's 48. And then adding and subtracting, you just go left to right. So that would be 2 plus 48 is 50, plus 1 is 51. So it's not coming out to 81 the way that it is. So that's why they're saying, let's put some parentheses somewhere to make this problem come out right. So I'm just going to play with my calculator here and see where I can put the parentheses around what part. So the way that it is, exponents are first. So I'm going to try to make the problem so that I would do something else first. For example, maybe I want to multiply or I want to do the adding first. So I'm going to put parentheses around the adding. So 2 plus 3. And then times 4 squared plus 1. And let's see if that works. Huh. Now that was a lot. But anyway, by putting the parentheses in the problem, that makes that part of the problem happen first. So normally exponents would have been first, but by adding parentheses into the problem, I was able to do the addition part first. And that was actually enough. Now this one I didn't know ahead of time, so I got lucky to have that part come out and work. In this problem, normally the adding 1 would have been last. Maybe that would have worked to put in parentheses. Obviously it's not going to because I already found the solution. But that's exactly how you would go about something like this. Think about what would you not normally do first and try putting the parentheses there and see if it works. Okay, so the solution happens to be, here's the original, 2 plus 3 times 4 squared plus 1 equals 81, and I had to add the parentheses around the beginning part, the adding, which wouldn't normally happen for a little while, and make that first. Okay, moving on. So that's just some playing with numbers. All right, so we're going to turn to our notebook, and I don't think it's page 61, because I believe that was last year's notebook. Let me double check here where we're at today. Okay, it's actually page 55 today. So turn in your notebook to page 55. And it says a key belief about arithmetic. And the first thing I need you to write down is this part that's underlined. It says if A, B, and C are real numbers, then, and I want you to write this part down, A, and then times parentheses, B plus C is equal to A times B plus A times C. And what we're doing here is we're just doing what we call distributing. We're multiplying A times the B and the A times the C. And that's called the distributive property. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to talk about also, which is going to be part of the distributive property, is the product of powers exponent property. And this one says if you have x to the a power times x to the b power, then that's equal to x to the a plus b power. And I'll show you a quick example of that. That's saying, for example, if we have something like x to the third power times x to the fourth power, the answer is going to actually be x to the 7th power. You take the two powers and you add them up. The reason why that works is because the first one, x to the 3rd power, x to the 3rd power is really the same as saying x times x times x. X to the 4th power is the same as saying x times x times x times x. So if I'm going to multiply the two things together, all together, I'm going to have, you can count them with me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 x's. So that comes out to x to the 7th power. Okay, so the fast way of doing it, instead of writing out a whole bunch of x's, is to just say 3 plus 4 is 7. Okay, we're going to use those two properties now. So for exercise 8, letter A, this one here, we're going to use the distributive property. This says 3, we're going to do 3 times 2x and 3 times 5. So that's going to make it 3 times 2x is 6x, and 3 times 5, so we'll bring the minus down, 3 times 5 is 15. And that'll be our answer, 6x minus 15. Okay, I'm going to make a little note here. Do not subtract 6 and 15. And the reason you don't want to subtract them is because 6 has an x and 15 does not. And we call those like terms when they have the same letter, and not like terms when they don't have the same letter. Okay, so I'm going to distribute here. Negative 5x times x and negative 5 times 7. So the negative 5x times x, that's actually going to make negative 5x squared. There's two x's, and that's why it becomes x to the 2nd power. It's the same idea as there's 3 x's and 4 x's, so there's 7 altogether. Here there's 1 and 1, that makes 2. Okay, bring my minus sign down, and then I'm going to say negative 5 times 7, and that actually makes negative 35. Now, when you have minus and negative, that changes to a plus. So it's going to be negative 5x squared plus 35 for my final answer. Anytime you have a minus and negative, you want to change that to a plus. And again, we're not going to add the negative 5 and the 35. Okay, so do not add. Negative 5 and 35. Again, it's because they're not like terms. One has a variable and one does not. Okay, this one, we're going to multiply these two. So we're going to say 4x to the 5th times 6x to the 2nd. We're going to say 4 times 6 is 24. And our x's, we're going to do like we did before. The 3 and the x to the 3rd and x to the 4th was x to the 7th. So x to the 5th and x to the 2nd is x to the 7th, because you add the exponents. Okay, so on this one, we multiply 4 times 6, but we add powers. When we got the x to the 5th times x to the 2nd, we make that x to the 7th. Add powers. Okay, we're going to keep on going. So this is more distributing. We have 3 things to distribute to now. Whenever I draw these little kind of like arrows over to show what I'm distributing to. I've had students say before, oh, it looks like a rainbow. Okay, so I'm going to say 3x times 2x to the second. So I'm going to say 3 times 2, just like up on this letter C, I did 4 times 6. So I'm going to say 3 times 2 is 6. And then x times x squared makes x to the third, because this x out here is 1x, and inside here it's 2x's, so altogether that's 3. Minus 3 times 5 is 15. And then x and x is 2x's, so x to the second. And then finally over to the third number, 3 times 3 is 9. And then x. Okay, the reason why that one has an x is because there's 1x and no x. So 1 plus 0 is 1, so it would just be an x. Okay, one last problem. This distributing to 3 again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the first time it's negative 4 times 2, that's negative 8. And x squared times x to the third, that's 2 plus 3 is 5. Next, always go back to the beginning, the negative 4. We'll bring the minus down. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. And x to the second and x to the second makes x to the fourth. Plus negative 4 times 3, that's negative 12. And x to the second times x, that's x to the third. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is kind of clean this up a little bit. So I'm bringing down the negative x to the fifth. But this minus a negative turns to plus. And this plus a negative turns to minus. It's kind of like multiplication rules. 2 negatives is a positive, and a positive and a negative is a negative. And that's the final answer for that one. Now these ones all have x's, but because they have different powers, you just leave it alone. Don't add them up. Okay, so do not add because the powers are different. Okay, so problems like E are called the distributive property. And then when you have an x and another x and you multiply them, that's when we're using the product of powers exponent property. You don't really have to remember names of them, you just have to remember how to use the different properties. That was the answer on that one. I didn't circle all my answers. And this was the answer on this one. Okay, so that's today's lesson. You'll have a little bit of number playing around like we did at the very beginning, and then a little bit of doing this distributive property. If you have any questions about the distributive property, please ask. You can ask during the notes, you can ask during the homework. Always ask questions if you have any.